population, 6.8 billion in 2010, and it's only going to get higher over time. And so we see most of this growth is happening in developing countries in their rural and urban areas. And so if we look at the top 7 countries as far as contributors to overall world population, who has the biggest impact, India and China for sure. Now these are 2 countries that have actually had a slower population growth rate over the last 20 years. However, they're so big, just naturally they're going to add a ton to the overall population. Third place would be Nigeria. And so I had a Nigerian student a few years ago, got really excited. Hell yeah, we're top 3. This isn't really that good of a situation because Nigeria does not have, when we go back to arithmetic density and physiological density, does not have a lot of arable land. So you're packing a lot of people into a small amount of area. Another characteristic of Nigeria is it actually kind of has its stuff together, kind of, sort of. So because of that, it's getting a large in-migration from individuals from nearby countries. And so it's growing naturally, high birth rates, but also from in-migration to Nigeria. Then we have Pakistan, a Muslim country, a largely Muslim country that very much disapproves of contraception. Then you got good old US of A. Of course, immigration plays a key role in understanding our contribution to overall world population. Indonesia, C number 4, same story, a Muslim country. And then finally, number 7, Bangladesh. And Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Pakistan have very much similar characteristics with largely Muslim countries that disapprove of contraception and birth control. And so this is another way to showcase the idea of developing countries is where we're going to see continued population growth. And so by 2050, for every 1 person in a quote-unquote developed country, there will be 7 in a developing country. So some characteristics as we go on through this next century. And so we're going to see a larger population. We'll probably crack the 9 billion plateau somewhere very much towards the end of this century. But like I said, the growth will slow down. I mean, we are growing. We will get up to 9 billion. However, globally, the rate is slowing down rather considerably. And this is largely due to a few factors, but lower fertility being overwhelmingly. And we can expect more of that. Some countries will actually see a declining population. So one country that's kind of panicking about this is Italy. And I'll talk about more about Italy a little bit later on. You're thinking, wait a minute, Italians, aren't they known for their lovemaking, their passion? What's going on there? Well, we're seeing largely the role of women in society playing a key role in understanding why Italy is actually declining or has the potential to decline. Next up, lower mortality and longer life. So some people think we could live to be 1,000 years old. This guy named Aubrey de Grey thinks that we can live to be 1,000 years old, and all we have to do is find that gene that's the aging gene, turn it off, and essentially our bodies will stay the same way we are currently the rest of our existence. Who knows? But there's no doubt with medical advancements, largely due to a lot of technologies from our very own Indiana University, and Purdue too, can't forget about them, are going to only increase mortality or lower mortality, increase life expectancy. And so we can expect to also see an older population. So that has lots of characteristics regarding marketing and business. For sure, we're going to see this in Indiana play out as we have an aging population, especially as those baby boomers get older. And like I've said, only going to see more migration within the country, but it's, very much so internationally. Just get used to it. Continue to be more urbanized across the world, especially in those developing countries are very much going to become more urbanized. And so I could see us being 70% urbanized by the end of this century. Like I said, all this growth in urban areas, in rural areas, but most part urban areas in developing countries. And finally, continued progress in women's equality. And that, like I said, goes up, very much ties to the third we see at the top there, the third lower fertility. So continued progress for women's equality is only going to improve globally, but also in those areas in which women don't have much say-so in any day-to-day decisions. Here's a map that shows crude birth rates, and so it's a way to indicate how many births occurred during a given year. So red in this case would be a very, very high birth rate, and then the blues, of course, a very, very low birth rate. So some patterns that we notice here. Of course, you're going to find Africa, parts of the Middle East, parts of Latin America are going to have higher birth rates than places like North America, U.S., Canada, Western Europe, even China, Japan, Asia, Russia, and Australia. Next up is the rate of natural increase. It's just a simple way to not include immigration to population growth or decline. So this is just based on natural increase, and so it's just simply comparing birth rates to death rates. So those areas that have very high birth rates but have lower death rates are showcased in yellow or green, where those places that have a birth rate and death rate, they're nearly equal, are going to be purple and blue. And so essentially what this shows is the places that are green and yellow have very high population growth just naturally, just from natural factors, not including migration at all. Now it's total fertility rate. So if I ask ladies in the class, how many children would you like to have in your life, in your lifetime? A good amount of them will say 0, 1, or 2. However, in other parts of the world, you still see a very, very high total fertility rate. So fertility rates remain very high, and so we kind of see some parallel patterns with crude birth rate that we see here in this map of total fertility rate. Now looking at the United States, infant mortality rates parallel to, in this case, very much with education levels. You look at these South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, and the Southeast in general fall a little bit lower on the education spectrum. So that plays a key role in understanding infant mortality rate, where you look at places like Minnesota and New England have much higher education levels. Now, don't ask me anything about Kentucky. I don't understand why Kentucky has such a low rate. It makes no sense at all. In terms of life expectancy, we see once again some characteristics play out. Those in the redder colors are 50 and below. So those are places that have very low life expectancies. Where places that are the darker green are places in which they have higher life expectancy. Some patterns that we see here, for instance, Japan, a lot of it's diet. Costa Rica, a lot of that's diet as well. Canada, I don't know. It could be or it couldn't be because of their universal health care. I'm not going to go there at all. But the idea, though, in developed countries like Europe, especially Western Europe, North America, Australia, tend to have better medical advances, higher economic levels to afford new technologies, and that plays a key role in why you have longer life expectancies in those places. But in other areas, violence, infectious disease are critical to understanding why life expectancies are so low. Next up is a term called OldAge dependency ratio. And so what this is just the number of people that are retired versus the number of people that are working. And so one of the problems that you have in places like Iowa and Pennsylvania and West Virginia is you have the fact that there's a large retired, large elderly population, but a much smaller younger population. And largely what's happening there is younger people are moving out. What's there to do in Iowa? I've been through Iowa. It's kind of cool, but Indiana's a whole lot better, and some of you probably are shocked by that. But Pennsylvania, no more jobs. It's the Rust Belt. West Virginia, beautiful state, but not many jobs there. A lot of cold jobs, which aren't that best for your lungs. Of course, Florida, that's the reason why it's so dark green, why it has such an old age dependency problem, is the fact that a lot of retirees head down to Florida. So one of the challenges in these places that are dark green is how can they reduce that old age dependency ratio and improve and try to retain young people. And then now globally, the infant mortality rate map, and once again, very similar patterns. And then finally, the sex ratio map. Very interesting map here. So places that are green are where you have an equal proportion males versus females. Places that are blue are places in which there's more males than females. And places that are pink are places where there's more females than males. And so guys, get excited, right? All of you American guys. Well, bad news is this is mostly grandma. So this is simply women outliving men, and this is very characteristic of developed countries, which is why we see much of the developed world pink. but those areas that are blue are largely cultural preferences for males in those societies. And so once again, we see the role of gender, we see the role of culture play out here regarding demographics.